Good morning to all. Nudging way, Gulier. My friend Pat, I have to tell you, just before we came on, was saying that I am not showing enough passion during this program. And I'm going to try to be passionate today. And I hope you'll be passionate too, Pat.
Hey, by the way, Collins, see today, I left St. Eunan's College in 1971, and we were supposed to have our 50th reunion back in 2021. But because of a variety of things, including COVID and whatever, there's a couple of tragedies, 2 people died. And we were having our 50th reunion 3 years late today. So I'm going to meet up with guys I haven't seen in, some of them I haven't seen in 50 years.
Well, when are you getting together and how are you getting together?
Well, first of all, we're meeting at the old Alma Mater, St. Eunan's, which I never liked very much anyway, but that's neither here nor there. And what do you call it? And then we're having a dinner in the Mount Errigal Hotel in Letterkenny tonight.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. That's very good. How many people will be there, Pat, do you think?
I think about somewhere between 50 and 60, I'm led to believe.
Jeez, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. As you probably know, I had a very similar experience way back in 2010 with the people who were at St. Columns with me. And it was very interesting. You suddenly realize how old you were because you look at these guys and they say, oh, geez, I saw this guy last time he was 18 or 17 and look at him now. But the other thing was the degree to which people actually hadn't quite changed.
Yeah.
You know? People who were shy and so on then tended to be more or less shy now. People who were very bombastic and pushy tended to be pretty much the same, you know?
Yeah,
do you expect to find that, or do
I expect to find that? There's always an outlier of somebody who doesn't quite fit the pattern.
Yes.
But by and large, the stereotype remains. The guys who were cocky and confident when they were 18 are still cocky and confident.
Isn't it funny how life doesn't teach most of us anything? Okay,
let's get child and I'll give you the man. Yeah.
Let's get serious. This is something we've talked about before, but it's still hitting the headlines. And that's what's called, I don't like that word, scoping. But anyway, they're having a scoping report. They're going to do an investigation into the sexual abuse and I presume physical abuse that was conducted in a whole series of very prestigious schools. And taught by Jesuits, by Holy Ghost fathers, you know, by Carmelites. So they gave figures in these times as to the number of allegations of abuse.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out to me, I did a blog on it, so there's a lot of points I have in it. But what's your own reaction? Would you want to say anything further from the last?
I'll steal probably what you're going to say. I just wrote it down because, as usual, I'm not very good at figures. It says 2,395 allegations of historical sexual abuse, 884 alleged abusers, and involving 308 schools. Now, it was carried out by a senior counsel called Mary O'Toole, and it ranged from 1927 to 2013. And Jude, they reckon, I heard a couple of people saying it's only the tip of the iceberg. They got a whole lot of people who have died who will never come forward and make the allegations. And there's all sorts of, and you said physical, as far as I'm aware, Jude, it doesn't include physical.
Doesn't include physical, yeah.
I don't think it does, you know. But anyway, Jude, let me tell you something. Now that I mentioned the St. Eunan's thing, we have a WhatsApp group, and a couple of boys were actually saying things that happened. And one of the guys the last day says, do you remember the day in the science lab when a certain young student was called and he was wearing glasses, and the president at the time told him to take off his glasses, and took off his glasses, and your man punched him full in the face twice in front of the class. And then there was another guy who told the story that he was an altar server, and during mass he put the bell too close to his foot, and when he got up he knocked over the bell during mass. And he says the priest, he's dead now, Dr. Kinnear, called him, you know, like this, and when he came over close he went just straight into his face, punched him.
Was this after mass or during?
After mass in the sacristy, you know. In other words, apparently the bishop had been at the mass, so Kinnear felt that his position had been humbled in some way. But that sort of stuff has never been recorded, and probably never will.
But that's physical, and certainly I would concur, as they say, with that about physical. I mean, I just remember now when you say that, take off your glasses. I mean, that was such a familiar thing. Take off your glasses and then
Yeah.
wacky. Now, they wouldn't, I must say, they didn't, none of the priests or teachers I saw punched people in the face. I've heard people say that they did, but I haven't seen it. But I have seen them again and again, slapping people across the face as hard as they could. And you know, they sometimes they hit you on the right cheek, the left cheek, the right cheek, the left cheek, the right. You know, it keep going as long as they're energy.
You know, it was premeditated. It wasn't sort of, you know, they lost the rag. It was deliberately done to humiliate.
Well, they saw that as the way you would drive home the point to these ragamuffins. But you know, that's, as you say, that's not what this scoping report is about. It's not about physical. I think it's very important to distinguish those two, because when people say child abuse, you know, we tend to think solely of the sexual. But I mean, physical abuse was a reality for I think for an awful lot more people than was sexual abuse. I'm not saying there wasn't sexual abuse as well, but I mean, my guess is that you or I never suffered sexual abuse, but we said, I don't know if you suffered physical abuse, but I certainly did. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you know the thing.
You haven't answered the question, Pat.
No, I didn't suffer.
Did you suffer physical abuse?
I think I got slapped a couple of times. Big deal.
You should have done your homework.
Stupid stuff, like, you know, but like no, and it wasn't sort of. In fairness, it wasn't extreme or anything like that. No,
really.
Your hand, got a couple of leather strap across hands a couple of times, but no, I didn't worry too much about that sort of crap. But you know, sort of punching young fellas about 14 on the face. Father McMahon, who punched the young fella twice, was a big fireman type fella, you know, and he punched this young fella. In fairness, the young fella left the school shortly afterwards. I don't know whether that was because of it, but I know he left and he went to school down, I think, about Cork. You know, so I presume that had something to do. But Jude, they got away with that and so on. But anyway, back to the scoping thing, Jude. You know, I think basically, and this is a personal opinion, I don't know whether you agree with it, I think the Catholic Church is finished there, and I genuinely do. The number now of allegations of abuse, of cover-up, and all the rest of it. Jude, when you consider the 2,295 allegations of historical sexual abuse, 884 alleged abusers, and 308 schools. Now that's just, they're saying that's as the record as is, but that there's as I said earlier, it's the tip of the iceberg. But the other thing as well, Jude, when you followed up on the what happened in the mother and baby homes, which was an RT documentary about a week ago, and then you look at all the sort of the clerical scandals, you sort of go, is there anybody in the Catholic Church who can stand up and say, I am not guilty?
Yeah. Well, I mean, given the number of cases or allegations of abuse, I'm surprised they found time to do anything else. Because I mean, it just seems massive. I think I draw a couple of things to your attention and to people's attention generally. I would agree that there probably was a considerable number of cases of sexual abuse. In fact, I know some people who were sexually abused, and I mean, it's just disgusting. It's just horrible. Like the idea that priests who set themselves up as models of Christ, you know, would treat youngsters that way is very bad. But also, of course, as models of Christ, they shouldn't be thumping people either. All of that's got reason. There's something that I brought up one time on a program, and I didn't get an answer. And that was, to what extent is the Catholic clergy different in terms of the level of sexual abuse from other groupings like, say, Church of Ireland clergy, Boy Scouts, or others? For example, they do say, well, I remember them at one stage saying, I don't know if this is still the case, but they said at one case, you're actually most likely to suffer sexual abuse in your own home.
Oh, I don't know about that. But I'm not disputing it, but I'm sort of saying
but I think they have in mind the wider family circle, not necessarily the parents.
Do you ever remember there was a guy called Robert Hughes, who was an Australian art critic and historian, and he wrote a book years ago called I think it's called The Fatal Shore. And anyway, homosexuality in Australia in the penal colony was known as the English disease. and they claimed that it was what we say, it emanated from the public school system where sexual abuse was so rampant that a lot of young fellas got used to the sex that they weren't interested in females. And so you asked the question. I presume in other jurisdictions, they had the same problems, but maybe disguised a different way. Like a lot of the old public schools, where young fellas were sent in, and when they were maybe 8, 9, or 10, to board and so on, and they never sort of met a woman and so on. And then, of course, when you're about 12, 13, that whole sexual sort of curiosity thing starts. So, like, I presume other countries, but the thing, I think, for some reason, the whole sex abuse thing in Ireland is absolutely synonymous with the Catholic Church.
Well, you see, here's a sneaking feeling I have. It's probably the criticism of clerical sexual abuse in many cases, I'm sure, is absolutely well-founded. But keep in mind that all the numbers that are cited are allegations.
Yeah.
Are we saying that all of the people who claim they were sexually abused were sexually abused? Because otherwise, if we say that, there's no point in going an inquiry. If these people should be punished, if they're still alive, then just go ahead and do it.
But look at what he called it. Remember when the Pope came to Ireland? The two main people were Bishop Casey and Father Michael Cleary. And I thought they were on a pedestal, and so on, so on, so on. And then when you discover Cleary had 2 children by his and so on, and you sort of go, wait a minute, we never thought that. So why don't we? And by the way, they were like, Cleary's people tried to claim that afterwards, when the woman came out and said, like, he was the father of 2 of my 2 children, they said that was just out to destroy the reputation of a fine man, until she said she was more than willing to take a DNA test. So that can we dismiss all these other ones as the same way?
Oh no, I wouldn't. I absolutely agree. I mean, if they find the time, they should test it out. But if in fact this thing about other groups like Church of England or Presbyterian or Boy Scouts or whatever, if that's true, or lawyers or doctors or school teachers, if that's true, if there is the same proportion of sexual abuse among members of different professions and different social groupings, then I would say that it's too narrow and too easy to go after the Catholic Church. I know there's a there's a level of hypocrisy. I agree.
No. The doctors or lawyers, excuse me, aren't in charge of lots of young boys in schools, and they don't have the same opportunity. And you'll find an odd lawyer and an odd doctor done, but it's very, very few, because there's there's all sorts of safety guards and guardrails, but there's not. When you have unique access to maybe 1,200 young boys in a school, and there's no guardrails, in terms of oversight.
Good point. I'll check it. I'll try to check that for next week. But I'm sure I read that somewhere. The other thing is this: people, reports, and journalists and people maybe like ourselves, we never tire of giving a kicking to the clergy, Catholic clergy. And in many cases, it's well merited. But, I remember Leo, what was it? What was the Fine Gael? Not Leo, but Enda Kenny. Enda Kenny. He made a speech, essentially telling the Vatican that it wasn't ruling Ireland. He was ruling Ireland, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I remember.
And he closed the embassy in the Vatican.
And he got a lot of praise for that, standing up and so on. I didn't feel anything like that at all. What I got the feeling was the Catholic Church was well on its knees at that stage. All sorts of revelations had poured out. And Enda was getting in and giving them a boot whenever they were on their knees. I feel that to some extent with the Catholic Church now. Maybe we've made the point that maybe there was a total corruption among many of the clergy. Let's see if there's anywhere else we could find that happening as well. Does it always have to go back to the Catholic Church?
By and large, yeah. You know,
Why? Why?
Jude, I remember reading that.
Other groups.
No, Jude, not to the same extent. No, definitely not.
Well, what
Because
about Church of England?
hold on, Doctor Cons. Keep your passion for
Well, I
someone
get
else.
a bit of passion into this.
Right. But here's the point: the Catholic Church asked its members to be celibate.
Yeah.
The Church of England didn't. There's some sort of repressed sexuality in a human being that has to come out some way, and that's all I'm saying. The Catholic Church, I think, created a unique set of circumstances where abuse was nearly inevitable.
Okay. I'm not sure about that either, but you could be right. A lot of people would say that it is unique to the Catholic Church because you have celibacy, and as you say, their suppressed sexual drive has to come out in some way. Again, I have a funny feeling that I've seen figures that suggest that despite the fact that the celibacy is unique to the Catholic Church, the Catholic clergy, that in fact the incidences of abuse are roughly the same in other churches and other groups.
Well, could well be, Jude. You know, I'm not. But hey, Jude, maybe we've checked this enough anyway. But I'll leave you with on this particular. There's a friend of both of ours rang me up one day and he says, "McGart, where's the highest concentration of Catholic priests in Ireland?" And I of course said Maynooth. He says, "No, Mountjoy." On that note.
Well, here's my final note on that. I know a number of priests around Belfast here. I don't know them intimately, but I know of them.
Yeah.
And some of them are, well, the ones that I know, many of them are really dedicated people.
Absolutely.
As far as I can tell now, except there's some corrupt life going on.
Let me get it on the record. I've met some priests who are the finest people walking the earth. I have no problem saying it, who have been totally decent from I would say, conception to the moment of their death, who have lived blameless lives and have done a lot of good. Of that, I have no doubt.
Yeah, I think we should keep these things in mind. Anyway, I'm going to check a few things and I'll bring the passion of my views
back to it. Yes,
Okay, right. Let's move from that to Trevor Ringland and Gregory Campbell. Now, you say both are playing the same tune. I can talk about Trevor, but I'm not sure what Gregory said.
No, it was Gregory had a platform piece in the Irish News last week, and he says people shouldn't be allowed to rewrite history. And you sent me a bit about Trevor Ringland, and I read Trevor's piece, and I agree with a lot of what Trevor's piece. I'm pretty sure you won't, but I do to a certain extent.
What do you agree with?
Well, he said basically a lot of things could have changed without the violence, and I have an idea that they could have. But then, you know, I remember Martin McGuinness's famous one when I said that to him. No, Hume always claimed that the tide was running, you know, of change was running, and it didn't need the violence. But I remember Hume's or McGuinness's one, yeah, right, Pat. Remember October 5th, and remember when people took the streets out with their battened off the streets, and he says they were peaceful people. So he says how much was going to change? Fair enough. But McGuinness said, look at the civil rights in the US. And across Danny the Red and Paris, was it, or Germany, or whatever the hell it was at the time. And he says the Labour Party was coming into England, and there was all that hippie movement, and there was a sort of a surge towards sort of liberation and freedom and I know human rights and all this sort of stuff. But anyway, here's the thing. The Irish News today, there's a guy, I think his name is Donnelly. I don't know if he's anything to, but anyway, he said Gregory shouldn't get a chance to rewrite history either. Gregory's suggesting that that there was no alternative to the IRA campaign of violence shouldn't hold sway. This guy said, why doesn't Gregory mention the fact that Gusty Spence and his gang of thugs were running around and well before the IRA campaign of violence, that they had murdered, I think it was Michael Ward, there was attacks on Catholic houses, etc., etc., etc. And the first policeman killed in the north was not killed by IRA. He was killed by loyalists during protests, etc., etc., etc. And anyway, the guy in today's Irish News said, basically, Gregory was rewriting history to sort of say that that unionism was not at fault for anything, that it was all those bad people in the IRA, and he said he shouldn't be allowed to get away with that. And that's basically it. Now, you can explain Ringland better than I can.
Well, I think that's an interesting point with regard to Gregory, and I suppose there is a case to be argued that we might have arrived at where we are without violence. I frankly don't believe it. I do think if you look at other situations, I mean, you mentioned the civil rights movement in the States. Civil rights movement hasn't achieved nearly all the things it could have achieved. for black people. Black people are
No.
still discriminated against like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And they're way behind in terms of education, poverty, just things generally in life.
Yeah, I agree with you
Anyway,
totally. Yeah.
let me go to Trevor England. I picked up some of what you said there, but I had a sort of a different emphasis from Trevor. Trevor says at one point, the IRA campaign was not about civil rights. It was about driving people such as me into the sea. Now, I would have two quarrels with that. One is that there were Republicans and people who became IRA people in the civil rights movement. And why shouldn't it be? So I'd challenge him on that the IRA, people who would become part of the IRA, were concerned about civil rights. Now, they might have been concerned about civil rights because they knew that would lead to repression from the state and so on. And therefore, their violent campaign would have a foundation and support. But he says the IRA campaign was about driving people such as me into the sea. I think that is total cobblers. I have never spoken to a Republican who ever said that they wanted to get all of the Unionists in the northeast of Ireland into the sea or get them out. Now, what the IRA campaign was about was English-British jurisdiction in the northeast of Ireland. It wasn't. I mean, I think, if anything, many Republicans had to struggle with Unionists. I remember Sammy Wilson, for example, being suggested that he was Irish as well as anybody else, and Jerry Adams was saying that kind of thing. And Sammy says, "No, I haven't a drop of Irish blood in my veins."
Gregory Campbell said that as well.
So on the other hand, it's not that they're saying you're different, we're going to drive you into the sea. What they're saying is you're Irish and you belong here as much as we do, and we want to join with you and govern this country. I think I think the Irish Times is too easy on that kind of thing. And I think they have another article today, maybe, but we haven't taken everything.
But it's true that I remember, I think it was in Derry, and I'm open to correction, that one of the original chants when they started British rights for British citizens. Jude, that wasn't sectarian or it wasn't Republican back then. They were still batting off the streets.
That's right. I remember John Hume was very big on that. I remember a brother of mine saying to me, the thing I really like about John Hume's campaign is that no question of nationalism or the border or anything. It's strictly civil rights. And I think some of the, to be fair to them, a few of the British Labour Party responded to that.
There's a guy, an MP, he got hit with a bat, and I think was his name Rose. I'm not sure. But Jude, another thing about it too, Trevor England said someone referred to the historical inquiries thing about, and it was one-sided and so on, that there was something like 1,400 murders, or was it 700 murders in the North unresolved. And I'm not arguing with that, but here they always leave out this one point, and I see Ben Lowry makes the point. Basically, the authorities worked hand in glove with loyalism. That's the first part. Secondly, I think over the years, something like 10,000 Republicans or nationals went through the court system. Quite a lot of them were jailed for a very long time. The Glen Anne gang, the loyalists, killed somewhere in the region of about 122, 130 Catholics. Not one of them served a day in jail, and so on.
They weren't necessarily IRA people.
They weren't necessarily, no. But what I'm saying, the system, the courts, the police service, the sort of official paramilitaries or militias, or what the fuck you want to call them, they were allowed a free run, and so on. So that is always conveniently omitted from when they start talking about, that there was no need for the IRA and there's all this sort of stuff. Now, Jude, let's get on the record. I don't believe the IRA's campaign achieved a lot. I think it's set up. When you want to take down a border and you start shooting people, more borders go up. But anyway, that's my opinion on it.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think if you look, it's a hard thing to say. It's a terrible thing to say. But if you look at countries throughout the world, most of them were established with bloodshed.
By violence,
which is, as I say, is a shocking thing. So it's not impossible that might have been the case here as well. But I was wondering about Trevor England and that thing where they conveniently, as you say, forget the fact that you had the Glenanne gang and all the rest of it, and Bloody Sunday and Monaghan bombs, etc.
Exactly.
I wonder, any dealings I had with Trevor in England, I hadn't a great bunch, but most of them, he's a very civil guy.
Yes, I've seen him
I've always found him to be a thoughtful, I would say he's an intelligent guy. So and maybe an upright person as well. So I suspect that he isn't deliberately overlooking these things.
No.
That people like him have conditioned themselves to the point.
Exactly, Jude. I think a lot of unionists, and I'm not sort of here to sort of pass judgment, but I think they have suppressed a lot of the reality. Trevor made some sort of reference to, yes, there's things happened in the past that really shouldn't have, but like that was dismissed in one sentence. It wasn't dismissed in the Catholic community. Bloody Sunday wasn't dismissed in one day. The what do you call it? The Falls Road massacre wasn't dismissed in one day. Internment wasn't dismissed in one day. And the sort of the sectarian campaign of unionism. 50 years of unionist rule and bigotry. Like he seems to think that Catholics should know that was all minor.
That's right. I suppose that's a tendency that people have when they're in power, to see power, them being in power, as being the natural state of things.
Yeah.
And people who try to disrupt that as being violent people.
Yeah.
But, I think the more often people say that wasn't the case, actually. What you had was repression. What you had was discrimination. What you had was people being shot dead for being Catholics.
Yeah. And do you remember the random sectarian killings? The short strand area and all the rest. The loyalist paramilitaries, people didn't need to be in the IRA. They just shot. Remember, there was a young fellow, I always remember him. His body was found in a pit with carcasses of dead animals on top of him. Things like that. Like, are the Catholic community supposed to forget all that and say, "Oh no, we were wrong and you were right"?
It's a terrible thing to say, but in ways there was a terrible logic to the loyalist campaign.
Yeah.
Because they literally were terrorists, and they were happy to acknowledge this.
Yeah.
Their idea was, we'll kill Catholics. It'll not matter what they are. In fact, if they're innocent, that's fine, even better, because that'll put the fear of God into the population.
Because nobody's safe.
And when the Catholic population gets frightened, they'll not put up with the IRA. They'll not give them the sort of passive support that they give them, and sometimes active support at present. It's the old thing about Mao Zedong, and the guerrilla fighter lives in the sea of the people. And that was their intention. It just didn't work that way. If anything, actually, it embittered people, and people who had not resorted to violence, I think, moved into that sphere.
Exactly.
Sad stuff. Anyway, this isn't as bad, but it's damn near as bad. England's playing the south of Ireland tonight, isn't it?
No, it's tomorrow, isn't it?
Is it tomorrow? Oh, okay. We're ahead of ourselves, anyway. What do you think about these two? What do you think about those two turncoats, Rice and Grealish?
You mean right? Traitors, you mean? Geez, I love to know. What is it? I always remember Declan. You're going to correct me. Somebody's going to correct me, but I think, was it the day before or a couple of days before, Declan Rice was named as Ireland's Young Player of the Year, and the following day, near enough anyway, he was selected to play for England. I had a laugh at the time, And Tony Grealish, Jack's father, played for Ireland. Now, in fairness, I have to put this on the record. I think Declan Rice's grandparents came from Cork, and his father was born in England. He was born in England. Jude, let's be honest here. I'd say he looked at the Irish team and says, "Look, this team is going nowhere," and the proof of the pudding is they have gone nowhere. And they probably, while I regard him as a traitor, in his head, I'm sure he was saying, "Wait a minute, England's a better option for me." And by the way, the fact that he's moved to Arsenal on £105 million transfer, and I'm sure he's on something like 300,000 a week. It worked out well for him.
At least, yes. I mean, I see it as absolutely sensible of them both, especially as they were, as you say, they're born in England. If they're not English by being born in England, there's something wrong. But it just raises a point. Some people have said anybody born in Ireland is Irish. Not according to the government. Remember, they brought in a bill that said that they were fearful that refugees.
There's a sort of a loophole that remember, if you're born in Ireland, that meant if you're born here, that meant your parents could stay here. So a lot of women who were coming here were pregnant to ensure that then they had rights of asylum.
Well, that's what they told us is the reason.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Would you be in favour of that, Pat?
No, Jude, I think every case has to be taken on its merit. See these sort of, black and white, I know regulations now.
Well, I'd be black and white on it now, because I would say if you're born, doesn't matter who your parents were, what their intentions were. If you're born in a country, you're entitled to be a citizen of that country if you choose to be so.
Jude, the other thing is, Jude, see if somebody's sort of artificial and comes here for a whole, what do we say, bad reasons. You sort of say, wait a minute, why should we facilitate? But, Jude, see, in fairness, I'll go with you about 99% of the way. That if you're born in the country, you should be entitled to stay.
I think that's the acid test, really. And I take your point that there are people, of course, who want to just use that as a device for getting a leg into the country. But I think it's probably less frequent than we would tend to believe. Yeah. Will you watch the match? I'll watch the match, Pat, when it comes on. If it's on tomorrow rather than today. And it'll be a little ache in my heart. I really like both players. In particular, I like Grealish. Although I
same here. I don't know why Grealish.
He's a lovable guy. He's a fun guy.
Apparently, he's a genuinely nice fella as well.
Rice is. I'm not saying Rice isn't a nice guy. In fact, I think Rice is a better player, just about. But there's something about Grealish that I warmed to. But at the same time, well, if they play well, there'll be a pang in my heart every time they touch the ball.
Yeah.
You find anything to that?
Yeah, I agree with you totally. Grealish on form is a brilliant player, but he's a luxury player, and I think Man City have sort of got a bit fed up with him. He can do things that a lot of other players can't do, but then Guardiola has got this sort of system that's so efficient. It's back to Barcelona, tap, and away you go.
Yeah. There's no. Well, you see, they said this with regard to the guy that played for the Portuguese guy. That played superstar.
Ronaldo.
That played for Man
Ronaldo.
United.
Ronaldo.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Pat. They say this of Ronaldo, that he was such a powerful figure and such an amazing player that he tilted the balance of the whole team. The whole team didn't know where they were going. Whereas if you had somebody else, it'd be much more balanced.
Jude, we can't. We've only 3 minutes left. Sorry, we can't let this week go without mentioning that £336,000 bike shed in Dublin.
Oh,
what do you make of that?
Yes, Pat. I think most people have read about it by now. Well, how much did it cost again?
336,000. But Jude, I looked at it. I know. No, you see,
tell me how many bikes was in it.
18. And the other thing as well, Jude, it doesn't stop the rain getting at them. It's basically a bike rack. How it costs 300. But Jude, here's the thing. Justine McCarthy had a bit on it this morning.
Yeah,
apparently, like a couple of years back, they bought this £800,000 printer, but nobody took the specifications for it and how they would get it into the building. It turned out they had to knock down walls and remove old doors and all the rest of it. So the printer cost about roughly $2 million. Avery Calloway was a junior minister. He was living in Cork. He was living in Dublin, but he charged the government or the people of Ireland mileage from his holiday home in Cork. John O'Donoghue was the Minister for Justice. He went over to a race meeting, I can't remember where, and there was a bus shuttle from one airport in London to the other. And the bus shuttle takes 3 minutes and is free. He hired a limousine, £492. And then, what do you call him, McGuinness? John McGuinness, Fianna Fáil minister. He was a junior minister somewhere. And they spent $200,000 doing up a room for him. And one of the dictates was that they were to use a superior quality of toilet roll.
Well, I wouldn't begrudge him the toilet roll. I like a nice piece of toilet roll. I know it can be, some of them is more like sandpaper, and I would give them a pass on that, but I would not give them a pass on a children's hospital that somehow is shut up to cost.
It's going to cost 2.5
billion.
2.5. No, Jude, it's gone up to about 2.5 billion.
And I thought that was a very apt quotation in that article by Justine McCarthy today. She said, she cited your man, oh God, whatever his name is, Letitia Albert, Albert Reynolds, who said it's the little things that trip you up in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, that's true. It's easier to think of the stupidity and carelessness of public money about that bike shed than it is to think about it in terms of.
You see, the coalition were on a roll and there's an election coming up. I think at this stage, this 336,000 on a bike shed that you could spit from one end of it to the other. I think that's going to not play well. It's the little things that do trip you up.
Okay.
On that
note, Pat, I think we'll have to end there. We haven't given them a book, but we'll give them a book on Monday. How about that?
Okay, Jude.
Okay, all the best. Thanks, Pat.
All the best,
Merry weekend. Get it in the glorious sunshine.
Thank you. Good luck, Jude.